I want you to close your eyes for a second. Just imagine you are standing on a baseball field. It's a bright, sunny afternoon. You can smell the cut grass. The dust is kicking up around your cleats. You are a sophomore in high school. You're young, you're athletic, and frankly, you just feel invincible.
You've got that very specific kind of confidence that really only comes when you have your entire life ahead of you.
Exactly. It's the kind of day where nothing is supposed to go wrong. So you step up to the plate, you've done this 1,000 times, but then something happens that just isn't part of the script. A classmate takes a practice swing with a bat, but his hands are sweaty, or maybe he just loses his grip, the bat slips,
It flies through the air like a helicopter blade.
and it strikes you square in the face, right between the eyes.
And we aren't talking about a glancing blow here. This is the story of the author James Clear, and this moment is the definition of a catastrophic reset.
I am your host, by the way, and I'm thrilled to be jumping into this.
And I'm your resident researcher, glad to be here for this deep dive into his source material, specifically the framework he lays out in Atomic Habits.
Right, so the mission for our deep dive today is to really unpack how a person comes back from a moment like that and how it led to a completely new philosophy on human behavior. Because the injury was horrific, the damage was immediate and devastating.
Devastating is almost an understatement. His nose wasn't just broken, it was crushed into a distorted U-shape.
U-shape, yeah.
The force of the impact sent shockwaves through his skull, causing multiple fractures. Both of his eye sockets were shattered.
Just a horrific pivot point. 1 minute you're thinking about varsity tryouts, the next minute you are quite literally fighting for your life. And the immediate aftermath is even scarier.
Right? Because he wasn't just in pain, his brain was actually shutting down. He started having seizures right there in the school infirmary. He couldn't breathe on his own. They had to airlift him to a much larger hospital and place him into a medically induced coma just to keep him alive.
And the recovery wasn't some quick montage sequence either. It was a brutal grind.
A humiliating grind, honestly. When he finally woke up and started the healing process, he had lost the sense of smell. But there's one detail from his recovery in the book that really stuck with me just because of how visceral it is. At one point, he blew his nose.
Oh, I remember reading this in the source material. This made me physically cringe.
It's awful, right? He blows his nose, and the air pressure forces its way through the cracks in his shattered eye socket and literally pushes his eyeball outward.
Unbelievable.
His eye is bulging out of his head just because he used a tissue.
That is the moment where you realize how incredibly fragile you are. He's back to zero. Actually, he's below zero. He had to relearn how to walk in a straight line. He's doing basic physical therapy while his friends are out getting their driver's licenses and going to prom.
And for an athlete, the emotional toll is arguably worse than the physical one. He spent a year recovering, desperate to get back to baseball. He finally returns to the field, hoping to reclaim his spot, but he gets cut from the varsity team. He's sent down to junior varsity.
Which, for a guy who had been playing since he was 4 years old, has to be completely gut-wrenching. He talks about sitting in his car, crying, flipping through radio stations, just trying to find a song that would numb the pain. He was broken.
But this is where the story shifts. And it's not the Hollywood version where he suddenly hits a home run and wins the state championship. He goes off to college at Denison University. And he makes a realization that I think is the foundation of everything we're going to talk about today.
He realized he couldn't control the injury.
Exactly. He couldn't fix his broken skull overnight, but he could control his daily routine.
And this is why we are looking at this text today. We aren't just reciting tips here. We need to understand the philosophy. Because when he got to college, he didn't set a massive goal to become a superstar. He just tried to regain some agency.
Right. He started with what he called tiny habits. And I mean tiny. We aren't talking about running marathons. We are talking about going to bed at the exact same time every night.
Which, having been a college student, I can confirm is actually a massive achievement.
It is, in a dorm environment that's heroic. He focused on keeping his room tidy. He started lifting weights.
Not to become a bodybuilder, though,
Yeah,
right?
not at all. Just to feel strong again. To feel like he inhabited his body.
These seem so insignificant, though, on the surface. A clean room. A regular bedtime. How does that fix a shattered eye socket or a shattered ego?
Well, it doesn't fix the eye socket. It fixes the mindset. These were small wins. They gave him a sense of control back. And this points to the core thesis of the book and the title itself. Atomic has two meanings.
Right, let's define that for the listener.
Meaning one is an extremely small amount of a thing, a crumb, a single particle. But meaning two is the source of immense energy and power.
Like an atomic bomb. Small package, but a massive output.
Exactly. He didn't become an overnight success. But by his senior year, those tiny habits had compounded. He went from a coma patient to an academic All-American. He was the top male athlete at his university. He didn't play pro baseball, but he fulfilled his potential.
And that's what we really want to unpack for you, the listener, because I think a lot of people, and I definitely include myself in this, we tend to look for the silver bullet, the one big change that will fix our career or our health or our relationships. But the author is arguing for what he calls the aggregation of marginal gains.
The aggregation of marginal gains.
Yeah.
It sounds a bit like corporate speak, but it's actually a revolutionary way to look at human improvement. And to understand it, we have to look at the story of British cycling.
Oh, I love this story so much. But I feel like people gloss over just how bad they were before the turnaround.
They were historically terrible.
Hmm.
Mediocre would actually be a compliment. Since 1908, British riders had won exactly one gold medal at the Olympic Games. One single medal in 100 years.
That is dismal.
And in the Tour de France, which is, the Super Bowl of cycling, no British cyclist had ever won. Not once.
It was so bad that it was actually affecting the bike industry, right? Like manufacturers didn't want to work with them.
That's the crazy part. There was a top bike manufacturer in Europe that actually refused to sell bikes to the British team.
They turned down guaranteed money.
They turned down the sale because they were afraid of the negative publicity. They thought, if other professionals see the British team riding our gear, they'll just assume our gear is slow. That is a level of reputational toxicity that is hard to imagine.
So into this absolute disaster walks Dave Brailsford. He's the new performance director. And he doesn't come in with a big dramatic locker room speech. He comes in with a philosophy.
He was a true devotee of this marginal gains concept. His theory was simple. If you break down everything that goes into riding a bike and you improve each little piece by just 1%, you will get a significant increase when you put them all together.
But I want to be super clear here. We aren't just talking about pedaling harder or lifting more weights. They went deep into the weeds.
They went microscopic. Sure, they did the obvious stuff like redesigning the bike seats for comfort and rubbing alcohol on the tires for better grip. But Brailsford wasn't satisfied with that. He started looking at things literally nobody else was looking at.
Give us some of the specific examples from the text.
They tested different massage gels to see which one led to the fastest muscle recovery. They brought in biofeedback sensors. They even hired a surgeon to teach the riders the best way to wash their hands to avoid catching a cold.
Washing hands? I mean, that sounds absurd for a sports team.
But think about the logic. If you catch a cold, you miss training. If you miss a week of training, your performance drops. It's like a 1% loss. They even figured out which pillow and mattress led to the best sleep for each individual rider, and then they hauled those specific mattresses from hotel to hotel during races.
That is dedication. But my absolute favorite detail, and the one that makes Brailsford sound like a bit of a mad scientist, frankly, is the maintenance truck.
The truck.
Ah!
They painted the inside of the maintenance truck pristine white.
Which sounds like a total nightmare to keep clean. You're fixing greasy bikes with oil and lube in a white room?
That was exactly the point. In a white room, you can spot dust.
Dust!
Dust. Brailsford figured that dust on the floor eventually gets into the bike mechanics. It degrades the precision of the gears by a fraction of a percent. By keeping the truck surgical, the bike stayed at 100% efficiency.
It sounds obsessive, maybe even a little manic, painting a truck white just to find dust.
It is completely obsessive. But let's look at the scoreboard. Brailsford took over in 2003. 5 years later at the 2008 Beijing Olympics, the British team didn't just win, they dominated. They took 60% of the gold medals available in their events.
60%. From we won't even sell you a bike to literally owning the podium.
And it continued. In London 2012, they set 9 Olympic records. Bradley Wiggins became the first British cyclist to win the Tour de France. Then Chris Froome won it multiple times. They went from the laughingstock of the world to the most successful run in cycling history.
And it wasn't one big innovation. It wasn't a secret aerodynamic engine in the bike. It was the dust, the pillows, the hand washing, the massage gels.
It was the math of the 1%. And this is where the author brings in the numbers, which I think is really helpful for our logical listeners out there who want to see the proof.
Right, let's break down that equation.
If you get 1% better every day for a year, mathematically, you end up 37.78 times better by the time you're done.
Nearly 38 times better in a single year. That's huge.
But the inverse is terrifying. If you get 1% worse every day, you don't just stay the same. You decline nearly to zero. You end up at 0.03. You enter a decay spiral.
The problem is 1% is basically invisible in the moment. If I go to the gym today, I don't see a change in the mirror. If I eat a burger today, I don't look any heavier tomorrow.
Exactly. Habits are the compound interest of self-improvement. But like compound interest, the curve is flat for a really long time before it spikes. The book uses the airplane analogy, which I find really grounding. Imagine you are flying from Los Angeles to New York City.
Okay, I'm in the cockpit.
If the pilot adjusts the heading just 3.5 degrees south at takeoff, the nose of the plane moves just a few feet. No one on board would even notice. You wouldn't feel the turn in your seat. But magnify it across the entire United States, you don't land in New York. You land in Washington, D.C.
That's hundreds of miles apart.
A tiny shift at the start leads to a completely different destination. And this brings us to a concept called lagging measures. The argument is that your current outcomes are simply a lagging measure of your past habits.
Unpack that for me. Lagging measure.
It means the reality you see today is the result of what you did months or even years ago. Your net worth. That's a lagging measure of your financial habits over the last decade. Your weight. A lagging measure of your eating habits. Your clutter. A lagging measure of your cleaning habits.
So my bank account is basically just a history report.
Exactly. You get what you repeat. But this creates a massive psychological problem for us. We live in an immediate gratification world. We want the result right now. And when we work hard for 2 weeks and see zero results, we quit.
We've all been there. You go for a run 3 times, you eat a salad, you step on the scale, and somehow you've actually gained a pound. And you say, well, clearly this doesn't work. I'm going back to the couch.
He calls this the valley of disappointment.
That sounds like a lovely place to vacation.
It's where dreams go to die. To explain it, he uses the ice cube analogy. Imagine an ice cube sitting on a table in a room that is 25 degrees. It's frozen solid. You want to melt it. So you start heating the room.
Okay, I'm tracking.
You go to 26 degrees. Nothing happens.
Okay.
27, 28. The ice cube is still just sitting there. You are putting in the energy, you are doing the work, but there's no visible change at all. 29, 30, 31. Still nothing.
And this is exactly where most people give up. They think, I've raised the temperature 6 degrees and nothing happened. This is a waste of time. I'm not a runner. I'm not a writer.
Exactly. But then you hit 32 degrees. And the ice begins to melt. Now, was it that last 1 degree shift that melted the ice? No, it was all the energy stored during the previous shifts.
He calls this the plateau of latent potential.
Right. The work wasn't wasted, it was stored. When you finally break through, people call it an overnight success, but they didn't see all the work that happened between 25 and 31 degrees. Reality is exponential, but our expectations are linear. That gap between the two is where all the frustration lives.
So if we accept that small habits are the key and we have to somehow survive this valley of disappointment, how do we actually do it? Because the standard advice out there is always set a goal. Corporate America loves goals, Q4 objectives, lose 20 pounds. But the author actually pushes back on this pretty hard.
He does. And this is probably one of the more controversial parts of the text. He says, forget about goals. Focus on systems instead.
Okay, I have to pause you there because this flies in the face of everything we're taught. If I tell my boss, I'm not setting a goal for this quarter, I'm just focusing on my system, I'm probably going to get fired. How can you achieve anything without a specific target?
You might get fired, true. And to be fair, he isn't saying goals are completely useless. He's saying they're insufficient. Goals are good for direction. They give you a compass heading. But they are terrible for actual progress.
Explain the difference. What's wrong with goals?
He identifies 4 specific problems with being goal-oriented. The first one is the survivorship bias problem.
Which is what exactly?
Winners and losers had the exact same goals. Think about the Olympics. Every single person on the starting line of the 100-meter dash has the exact same goal. They all want the gold medal.
True. Nobody is training for 4 grueling years hoping to get bronze.
So if the winner and the loser share the exact same goal, the goal cannot be the thing that differentiates them. It wasn't the goal of winning the Tour de France that propelled the British cyclists. It was the system of hand washing and white trucks and massage gels.
That's actually a really disturbing point when you sit with it. We look at the winner and say, oh, they succeeded because they had a big, ambitious goal. But the guy who came in dead last had the exact same goal. We just ignore him.
Exactly. Problem number 2 is that goals are momentary. Imagine you have a messy room. If your goal is to have a clean room, you can summon the energy to clean it on a Saturday. You reach the goal. Success. But if you don't change the sloppy habits that led to the mess in the first place, the system, You'll just have a messy room again in a week.
You're treating the symptom, not the disease.
You're taking a painkiller for a broken leg.
Mm.
The underlying issue is untouched. Problem number 3 is that goals restrict your happiness. The implicit assumption behind any goal is, I'll be happy when I achieve this.
We push happiness off to the future constantly. I'll be happy when I lose the weight. I'll be happy when I get the promotion or buy the house.
It creates an either-or conflict. Either you achieve the goal and you're a success, or you fall short and you're a failure and a disappointment. But a systems-first mentality allows you to be satisfied anytime your system is running. You can be happy in the process, not just at the finish line.
And what's the fourth problem?
The yo-yo effect. Goals are for winning the game. Systems are for playing the game. Think about the marathon runner. They train for months. They cross the finish line. They achieve the goal. What happens the very next week?
They stop running entirely.
Usually, yes. The motivation just evaporates because the goal is gone. That's why so many people revert to their old bad habits right after hitting a milestone. True long-term thinking is goalless thinking. It's about the cycle of endless refinement. There's a quote that sums this up perfectly. This is where we get into the onion model of change.
The onion model, like layers.
Exactly. Imagine 3 layers.
Yeah.
The outer layer is outcomes. That is what you get. Losing weight, publishing a book. The middle layer is processes. That is what you do. Going to the gym, writing 500 words a day.
Yeah.
But the core, the center of the onion is identity. That is what you believe.
And most of us, when we try to change, we start from the outside, right?
Right. We focus almost entirely on the outcome. I want to be skinny. I want to be rich. But the better approach, the sustainable approach, is inside out. Start with identity. I want to become a healthy person.
I mean, it sounds a bit like semantics, though. What's the practical difference in real life?
The text uses a great example of 2 people trying to resist a cigarette. Person A is offered a smoke and says, no thanks, I'm trying to quit.
Sounds reasonable enough.
It does, but think about the psychological implication. They still identify as a smoker who is currently trying to do something else. They're a smoker engaging in self-denial. Person B is offered a cigarette and says, no thanks, I'm not a smoker.
It's a tiny shift in language. I am not versus I am trying.
But it's a massive shift in mindset. Behavior that is incongruent with the self will simply not last. You can want more money, but if your core identity is someone who consumes rather than creates, you'll always be pulled back to spending.
There's this really fascinating story in the material about a nail biter named Brian Clark.
Yes, he bit his nails his entire life. It was a severe nervous habit. He tried to stop through willpower. He tried bitter tasting polish. He tried everything. Nothing worked. Then he decided to go get a manicure.
Which is a bold move for a guy with chewed up bloody fingers.
Right, you'd think he'd be too embarrassed. But he did it, and surprisingly it worked. Not because of the money he spent, but because for the first time his fingers actually looked nice. The manicurist told him he had really healthy nails aside from the biting. Suddenly he was proud of his hands. His identity shifted to someone who has nice hands. And you don't bite nice hands.
It wasn't about raw willpower anymore. It was about protecting this new identity he had formed.
Exactly. And this leads to my absolute favorite metaphor in the entire deep dive today. The concept of the vote.
The vote. I love this because it really takes the pressure off of being perfect.
We tend to think we need to be flawless. If we miss one workout, the whole week is ruined. We failed. But the author says, look, every single action you take is a vote for the type of person you want to become.
Okay, so every action is a ballot.
Right. If you write 1 page today, you cast a vote for being a writer. If you practice the violin for 5 minutes, you cast a vote for being a musician.
Oh, what if I mess up?
Well, you don't need a unanimous vote to win an election. You just need a majority.
So if I eat a greasy pizza on Friday night, that's a vote for the unhealthy party. But if I eat a salad the other 6 days, the healthy party still overwhelmingly wins the election.
Precisely. It allows for a bad day. You can lose a few districts and still comfortably win the presidency. It shifts the focus from rigid perfection to the accumulation of evidence. You are proving to yourself who you are, one small vote at a time.
I really like that. It feels manageable for real people. But I want to pivot a bit to the how. It's easy to sit here and say, cast a vote for being a runner. It's much, much harder to actually put on the running shoes when it's raining outside and you're exhausted from work. We know what we want to be, but our brains so often fight us on the actual execution.
That friction you're describing is biological. It's not a moral failing. To understand why we resist good habits and why we fall so easily into bad ones, we have to stop looking at willpower and start looking at wetware. We need to look at the neurology of how brains actually learn.
The hardware of the brain itself.
Exactly. And surprisingly, the best way to understand human brain hardware is to look at a very distinct experiment from 1898 involving hungry cats.
Thorndike's cats. This is a classic psychology study.
Edward Thorndike placed cats in what he called a puzzle box. It was a crate with a door held shut by a simple latch mechanism. To get out and reach a bowl of food sitting just outside the cat, had to press a lever or pull a little loop.
Now imagine being the cat. You're hungry. You're trapped in a strange box. You aren't sitting there analyzing the physics of the latch mechanism.
Oh, you're freaking out. The cats displayed completely random chaotic behavior, scratching the walls, digging at the floor, meowing loudly, but eventually, purely by accident, they would bump the lever.
Click. The door opens, they get the food.
Right. Now, Thorndike takes that exact same cat and puts it back in the box. Does it remember the solution immediately? Not really. It still wanders around, maybe gets frustrated again. Eventually, bam, it hits the lever again.
And over time, the duration it takes to escape drops, right?
Drastically drops. The first few trials took about a minute and a half of just chaotic struggle. The last trials, 6.3 seconds. The cat goes in, hits the lever, walks out.
From 90 seconds to 6 seconds.
Because the brain learned the rule. Lever equals food. The useless behaviors, the scratching, the meowing, they faded away. A habit is essentially a reliable solution to a recurring problem in your environment. It preserves mental energy. Your conscious mind is a massive bottleneck. It can really only focus on one thing at a time. So the brain desperately wants to offload repetitive tasks to the non-conscious mind.
It's zombie mode. You just do it without thinking.
It is. And this process breaks down into a four-step feedback loop. The habit loop. Cue, craving, response, reward.
Let's walk through these 4 steps quickly because this is the operational framework for everything else we're going to discuss.
First is the cue. This is the bit of information that predicts a reward. It triggers your brain to initiate a behavior. Seeing the coffee pot on the counter. Feeling the vibration of your phone in your pocket.
Okay.
Second is the craving. This is the underlying motivation. And this is a really key distinction. You don't actually crave the habit itself. You crave the change in state it provides.
Meaning what exactly?
You don't crave smoking a cigarette. You crave the relief from stress. You don't crave turning on the television. You crave the entertainment or the distraction from a hard day.
That makes a lot of sense.
Third is the response. That is the actual action you take, the habit itself.
And fourth?
Finally, the reward. This satisfies the craving, and crucially, it teaches the brain which actions are worth remembering for the future. If the reward is good, the loop is closed and strengthened.
And the author takes this loop and turns it into a practical system called the 4 laws of behavior change.
Yes. You want to build a good habit, you just have to hack these 4 steps. Law 1, make the cue obvious. Law 2, make the craving attractive. Law 3, make the response easy. And Law 4, make the reward satisfying.
And if you have a bad habit you want to break, you just invert those laws right. Make the cue invisible, make the craving unattractive, make the response difficult, and make the reward unsatisfying.
Exactly. It's a complete toolkit for behavioral design.
So let's deep dive into the first law. Make it obvious. This is all about awareness. Because as you said, most of our habits are in zombie mode.
Right. We do them completely on autopilot. To change them, we first have to bring them into the light. We have to see them. The text talks about the Japanese railway system and a very unique technique they use called pointing and calling.
I've actually seen videos of this. It's fascinating. The train conductors look like they are performing a choreographed dance on the platform. They physically point at the speedometer and yell speed is 80. They point at the signal light and yell signal is green.
To a Western outsider, it looks a little silly. But the data is undeniable. It reduces errors by 85%. It reduces workplace accidents by 30%.
Why does it work so well?
Because it forces a non-conscious habit into the conscious level. You cannot be on autopilot if you are physically engaging your eyes, your hands, and your vocal cords all at once. You are explicitly flagging the behavior for your brain.
So how do we do this in our own lives without, yelling at our toaster in the morning?
He suggests creating a habit scorecard. Just take a piece of paper and list out every single thing you do in a standard day. Wake up, turn off alarm, check phone, go to bathroom, brush teeth, shower, make coffee. And then just rate them, positive, negative, or neutral.
And the goal here isn't to start changing them immediately, right?
No, not at all. Just observe. Oh, how interesting that I check my social media immediately upon waking up. Oh, I see that I eat a sugary cookie every single time I walk past the break room at 2 p.m. You cannot fix a problem you can't see.
Okay, so we have baseline awareness. Now we actually want to build a new habit. The source material cites a study here regarding exercise that really blew my mind.
The implementation intention study. This is the gold standard for planning behavior.
Yeah.
They took 3 groups of people. Group 1 was the control group. They were just asked to track how often they exercised over a few weeks. Group 2 was the motivation group. They had to read extensive material on the benefits of exercise for heart health. They got a big motivational presentation. They were pumped up.
Now, basic intuition says group 2, the highly motivated group, should do really well.
Intuition is dead wrong here. The motivation group did basically no better than the control group. About 35 to 38% of them exercised at least once a week. The motivation just faded the moment they went back to their real lives.
But there was a third group.
Group 3 was the planning group. They weren't given the motivational speech. Instead, they were forced to write down one specific sentence. I will partake in 20 minutes of vigorous exercise on this day, at this time, in this specific place.
And the result?
They had a 91% success rate.
91% versus 35%. That is a massive gap. And the only difference was literally writing down when and where.
Clarity dissolves resistance. Many people go through life thinking they lack motivation, when what they actually lack is clarity. If you just say vaguely, I want to run more worky, you wake up and you have to decide, do I run now? Do I run at lunch? Where do I run? What shoes do I wear? That decision fatigue kills the habit before it starts. The formula is incredibly simple. I will do behavior at time and location.
It takes the decision-making entirely out of it. It's 6 p.m., I'm in the living room, I do yoga, it's a script you just execute.
And there's a really special variation of this called habit stacking.
Which ties back to a great historical anecdote about the Diderot effect. Tell us about Denis Diderot.
So Denis Diderot was a famous French philosopher in the 1700s. He was broke for most of his life, lived in poverty. But then he came into some money because Catherine the Great bought his library. He suddenly had cash, and he bought a beautiful scarlet robe. It was magnificent.
A very fancy robe.
Too fancy. He put it on, walked around his dingy apartment, and realized his old rug looked terribly cheap compared to his beautiful new robe. So he went out and bought a new rug. But then the old chair looked ratty sitting next to the nice new rug, so he bought a new chair, then a new desk. It's the spiral of consumption. One purchase psychologically leads to the next.
We've all been there, honestly. You buy a new phone, suddenly you need the matching case, then the wireless earbuds, then the fast charger.
Exactly. It's a chain reaction.
Yeah.
But the author says you can actually use this connectedness for good. Habit stacking anchors a new habit you want to build to an existing habit you already do every day. Instead of finding a new time and place, you use a current, reliable habit as the trigger.
What's the formula for that?
After current habit, I will do new habit.
Give me some examples.
After I pour my morning cup of coffee, I will meditate for 60 seconds. After I take off my work shoes, I will immediately put on my gym clothes. After I sit down to dinner, I will say one thing I'm grateful for.
I love the one about after I flush the toilet, I will do 2 push-ups.
The toilet push-up. It sounds ridiculous, but it works. The key, though, is specificity. Don't say when I take a break at work. That's too vague. Say when I close my laptop lid. The cue needs to be a highly specific, obvious, physical action.
Now, speaking of obvious cues, we have to talk about environment design, because I think people vastly overestimate their own willpower. We think, I have discipline, I can resist the cookie on the counter.
We love to think we are the conscious masters of our own destiny. But environment is the invisible hand that guides human behavior. There was a fascinating study done in a hospital cafeteria by a physician named Anne Thorndike. Completely no relation to the cat researcher, by the way.
What did she do?
She wanted to get hospital staff and visitors to drink more water and less soda without actually telling them to do it.
So no lecturing. They didn't put up warning posters saying soda causes diabetes.
Didn't say a single word to anyone. They just fundamentally changed the layout of the cafeteria. They moved the bottled water to eye level in the main refrigerators. They added small baskets of bottled water right next to all the food stations.
And what happened?
Over the next 3 months, soda sales dropped 11.4%, and bottled water sales went up 25.8%. People chose the water simply because it was more obvious and accessible.
They didn't suddenly want water more on a moral level. It was just right there in front of them.
We choose what is obvious. The author has a great personal example of this with eating apples. He'd buy a bag of apples, put them in the crisper drawer in the bottom of the fridge, and then just never eat them. They would rot. Because the crisper drawer is where good intentions go to die.
Out of sight, out of mind.
Literally out of mind. So he bought a display bowl and put the apples right in the middle of the kitchen counter. Suddenly he's eating apples every day. Vision is our absolute dominant sense. 10 million of our 11 million sensory receptors are dedicated solely to sight. If you want to do a habit more often, make the visual cue a prominent part of your environment.
But practically speaking, I live in a small apartment. I can't just redesign my whole house or build a home gym.
You don't have to knock down walls, but you can define what he calls activity zones. This is especially crucial for people working from home now. If you work from your bed and you watch TV in your bed and you sleep in your bed, your brain is completely confused, doesn't know what state to be in. Is this the focus zone, the entertainment zone, or the sleep zone?
And that leads to things like insomnia, right?
It does. There was a study where they told severe insomniacs to only use their bed for sleep. No reading, no phones. If they were awake, they had to physically get up and leave the room. Over time, the brain relearned the singular association. Bed strictly equals sleep.
So one space, one use.
Yes. If you have a small space, use a specific chair only for reading. Use the table only for eating. Don't mix your work laptop and your relaxation on the exact same spot on the couch.
This environmental concept applies heavily to breaking bad habits too, right? The inversion of the first law. Make it invisible.
Yes. The Vietnam heroin study is the most famous example here, and it's one that really challenged and shocked the medical community at the time.
This is the one where everyone thought the returning soldiers would cause a massive crime wave of addiction, right?
Exactly. In the early 1970s, there was an absolute panic in the U.S. government because 15 to 20% of soldiers in Vietnam were actively addicted to high-grade heroin. They were preparing for a massive public health crisis when the war ended, but then the soldiers came home, and 90% of them just stopped spontaneously.
No rehab clinics, no terrible withdrawal periods in hospital,
Oh, they just stopped using almost overnight.
which completely contradicts everything we thought we knew about chemical addiction. We thought once you're physically hooked, you're hooked for life.
Because we usually treat addiction as a purely moral failing or a permanent biological switch that gets flipped. But what actually happened was the soldiers left the environment of war, the intense stress, the jungle, the friends who were also using the constant visual cues of the drug, and they returned to a cue-free environment back in their hometowns. The triggers were gone, so the craving subsided.
So what we call disciplined people aren't necessarily just stronger-willed than the rest of us.
That's the big secret of self-control. Highly disciplined people just structure their lives in a way that requires less heroic willpower. They experience fewer temptations. It's significantly easier to avoid eating a cookie if you just don't buy the cookie at the grocery store. If you want to stop checking your phone while you work, leave it in another room, make the cue invisible. Don't rely on willpower, rely on architecture.
Okay, moving on to the second law. Make it attractive. This is all about craving. Why do we actually want the things we want?
Here we have to talk about evolutionary biology and supernormal stimuli. Nico Tinbergen, a Nobel Prize-winning behavioral scientist, studied herring gulls in the wild. The adult mother gull has a yellow beak with a very distinct small red dot on it. The baby chicks instinctively peck at that red dot to ask for food.
Just a hardwired simple instinct.
But Tinbergen experimented to see how far he could push that instinct. He created a fake cardboard beak with not one, but 3 red dots on it.
And how did the babies react?
They went completely nuts. They pecked at the cardboard beak, frantically ignoring the real mother. It was a supernormal stimulus, an exaggerated hyperversion of reality that overloaded their neural pathways. And the author argues that modern human society is basically just a giant cardboard beak with 3 red dots.
Junk food is the most obvious human equivalent here.
It absolutely is. We're walking around with Paleolithic brains in a modern, calorie-rich environment. On the ancient savanna, salt, sugar, and fat were incredibly rare and valuable for survival. If you found a sweet fig tree, you ate as much as you possibly could because you didn't know when you'd see sugar again.
And now we have drive-thrusts on every corner.
Right. And modern food scientists actively engineer products to hit what they call the bliss point. They calculate the mathematically perfect ratio of salt, sugar, and fat to excite your brain to the maximum level without actually making you feel full. They use dynamic contrast, like an Oreo cookie, which is crunchy on the outside and creamy on the inside, to keep the brain constantly interested. It's a deliberate hijack of our evolutionary instincts.
And neurologically, this is all driven by dopamine, right?
The dopamine feedback loop, yes.
Yeah.
Dopamine isn't just about experiencing pleasure. It's really about desire. It's the chemical of motivation. And the crucial discovery here is that dopamine spikes during the anticipation of the reward, not just when you actually get it.
Which totally explains why daydreaming about an upcoming vacation is sometimes more fun than the stressful trip itself.
Exactly. Wanting versus liking. The anticipation drives the behavior. To build a good habit, we need to deliberately spike that dopamine. We need to make the craving strong enough to get us off the couch. One really clever way to do this is a strategy called temptation bundling.
This brings us to the Ronan Burns story, the engineering student.
A very smart guy. He loved watching Netflix, but he knew he desperately needed to exercise more. He wasn't intrinsically motivated to ride a stationary bike, but he was highly motivated to binge-watch shows. So he used his engineering skills to hack his exercise bike. He wrote a computer program where Netflix would only play on his screen if he was pedaling at a certain minimum speed.
What happened if he slowed down?
The show paused immediately until he sped back up.
That is absolute genius. He artificially linked the want, which is Netflix, with the need, which is the exercise.
It's a perfect real-world application of Premack's principle. The principle states that more probable behaviors will reinforce less probable behaviors. The combined formula is very practical. Step 1, after my current habit, I will do the habit I need. Step 2, after the habit I need, I will do the habit I actually want.
Give me a concrete example.
So say you want to check social media, but you need to clear your work inbox. The bundle is after I sit at my desk, I will process 3 emails. That's the need. Then after I process 3 emails, I get to look at Instagram for 5 minutes. That's the want. You sandwich the hard work right between the reliable cue and the attractive reward.
Another incredibly powerful way to make things attractive is through the culture we surround ourselves with, the social environment. Because fundamentally, humans are herd animals, right?
We are deeply social creatures. We desperately want to fit in with the tribe. And the story of the Polgar sisters is the ultimate extreme example of how powerful this social conditioning is. Laszlo Polgar was an educational psychologist who had a very strong theory. He firmly believed that geniuses are made, not born. He thought talent was mostly a myth, and he wanted to prove it to the world.
So he basically turned his own kids into a living experiment.
He literally did. He declared before they were even born that he was going to raise his 3 daughters, Susan, Sophia, and Judith, to be world chess champions. And he carefully created a totally controlled environment to make that happen.
Describe what that house looked like.
It was an absolute shrine to chess. The house was filled top to bottom with chess books. Pictures of famous grandmasters were hanging on the walls instead of regular art. The girls didn't go to normal school. They were homeschooled with chess as the central subject. They played constantly against each other and against their parents.
No, to an outsider, that sounds like a grueling, joyless childhood, being forced to study a board game all day.
But that's the trick of the social environment. To them, it was entirely normal. It wasn't a chore. Everyone they knew played chess. They were praised and loved for playing chess. It was highly attractive because it was simply the culture of their home.
And the result of this grand experiment...
All 3 of them became grandmasters. Judith specifically became one of the greatest chess players of all time, male or female. The experiment worked perfectly.
So the lesson for us isn't necessarily to brainwash our kids, but to consciously join the right tribe.
Right. We naturally imitate the habits of 3 groups. The close, which is our family and friends. The many, which is the broader tribe or society, and the powerful, which is people with status and prestige. If you want a difficult habit to feel attractive, join a group where your desired behavior is their normal, everyday behavior.
So if you want to read more, join a book club.
Exactly. If you want to get fit, don't just try to exercise alone in your basement where it feels isolating. Join a local running club or a CrossFit gym. Because when you walk in there, exercising isn't something you have to force yourself to do against the grain. It's just what everyone around you is doing. The social pressure works in your favor instead of against you.
Wow, we've covered a massive amount of ground here today. We've gone from a crushed nose on a baseball field to British cyclists checking for dust to Japanese train conductors pointing at lights, hungry cats in boxes, and Hungarian chess grandmasters. Let's try to bring this all together for the listener. What are the core big takeaways from this deep dive?
If we have to distill it down, I'd say there are 4 main pillars. 1, success isn't a single defining moment of glory. It's the product of boring daily habits. Stop looking for the silver bullet and focus entirely on that 1% marginal improvement. Be like the British cycling team, hunt for the dust in your own life.
Love that.
2, forget about setting massive goals. Focus on building reliable systems. Goals are for winning one-time systems. Systems are for winning repeatedly over a lifetime. Don't fall for the trap of saying, I'll be happy when.
Right, focus on the process.
3, change your identity. Don't just try to change what you do actively, change who you believe you are. Say, I am a runner, not I'm trying to run. Cast your small votes every day to prove that new identity to yourself.
And the final one.
4, Manipulate the habit loop to your advantage. Make the good cues obvious in your environment. Make the cravings attractive by bundling them. And ruthlessly invert that for your bad habits, make them invisible and completely unattractive.
And for the listener sitting there right now thinking, okay, this all sounds great in theory, but where do I actually start? It feels like a lot to overhaul.
I think the most empowering takeaway from all of this is realizing that you are the architect of your environment. You are not just a victim of it. You can literally design your space to serve your best interests. And above all, you need patience. Remember the ice cube analogy. Deeply respect the plateau of latent potential. Just because you don't see results in the first week or the first month doesn't mean the system isn't working. The heat is building up. The melt is coming. You just have to stay in the room.
I really want to leave you, the listener, with a final thought today, something to really chew on after you turn this off. We talked a lot today about how you ultimately become your habits.
Yes, your habits are your destiny.
So here is the provocative question I want you to ask yourself. If you look at your current trajectory right now, not your current results, don't look at your bank account balance today or the number on the scale today. Look at your daily habits. If you stay on this exact trajectory, where will you end up in 10 years?
That is a very confronting question to ask yourself honestly.
It is. Will you be healthier, wealthier, happier? Or will you be significantly worse off? The current results are a snapshot, they lie. The trajectory tells the absolute truth.
And if you don't like the answer to that question,
If you don't like the answer, you do not need to panic and change everything tomorrow. You don't need a massive overhaul, you just need to change 1%. What is the one single tiny 1% shift you can make today to change the ultimate destination? Because remember, a shift of just a few degrees at the start is the difference between landing in New York and landing in Washington, D.C.
and that shift simply starts with the very next action you choose to take.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the architecture of change. Go out there and move that ice cube just 1 degree today.
See you on the next deep dive.